Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this workshop. I hope we can have some support to mute the incoming people as they drip in. But I would like to thank you all for being here this morning or afternoon, evening, and for the second workshop on sustainable rice cultivation for validation verification bodies. You know that Gold Standard published a methodology on sustainable rice cultivation last year. We're hoping that this methodology will be very impactful in attracting a lot of finance towards small producers of rice throughout the world. We are collaborating with IRI and the Business Partnership Platform to especially promote this in Vietnam. That's why you would see a lot of examples from Vietnam and translations in Vietnam, but you'll hear a little bit more about the program later. But in any case, this workshop is meant to be applicable globally, and we're hoping to see many of you from around the world doing a lot of projects around the world. So thank you once again for being here with us. We're going to have an hour and a half of presentation and exercises. We hope that this is not just a lecture, but something that you find useful and interact and calibrate with each other. For those of you who came to the calibration workshops last year, we're going to do something similar in terms of methodology. And basically what we're going to do is to, welcome you and introduce the workshop. We'll introduce the RICE methodology again. I hope you have seen the previous workshop. If you haven't, there is a recording that you can see that is on the RICE Hub. We'll talk about the special emission reduction calculations and uncertainty assessment. You can ask questions after this session. There's going to be a whole session on the RICE Sustainability Hub that we've published recently, and we'll David will walk you through some of the resources that we have uploaded there, such as an example pre-filled project design document template, a RICE an emission reductions calculation tool based on the RICE methodology, which should be very helpful both for project developers and for VVBs. Also, what the resources are that are available in Vietnamese, just in case you do projects in Vietnam. And we will talk also about the VVB checklist for validation of projects that we have developed for your work on the field to be much easier and quicker, hopefully. Then this is different from the validation checklist that we presented last year. And in the calibration workshops, this is specifically for this methodology. So we're looking forward to your feedback on that as well. And then we'll get into a case study or exercise where we're going to interactively solve a few examples based on this methodology and test also the checklist, just like last year. And then we'll have more questions and answers if there's any. So in order to prepare us all and warm us up and make sure that we know how to use forms, well, first of all, let me present the presenters. That's me. You probably all know me. I'm Senior Manager of Oversight at Gold Standard. Then we have David. Hi, David. He's recently joined as Senior Manager for Capacity Development in the growth team. We have Lokesh Dubey, who is our Senior Manager in Standard Development on both land use and forestry and energy and waste side. We have Ashwin, who is our absolute expert on land use and forestry. And we have Ha Huang Tang, who has been extremely valuable for this project, developing materials, the methodology, and everything that you see in the RICE Hub. So thank you, everyone, for being here with us. And now that we've presented ourselves, we'd like you to present yourselves. So if you could please use this QR code with your phones or enter this short link. So it's forms.office.com/e/ and then this short code over here. And that would get you to a form that you can fill out. And that form will help us basically measure the pulse of who we are, how much do we know about the methodology and the standard, and also help us get warmed up for the rest of the session. Thank you. I don't see any responses coming in. But I guess it's too early still. I'm too impatient. But if you have any questions, please raise your hand. If you have any issues with the form, the link in the chat box, of course. Can somebody please? Ah, yes, thank you. One thing I should have said, and I forgot to say, is this webinar is recorded, as most webinars are right now, because not everybody was able to join us at this time. You know, some of your colleagues are probably on audits or in different time zones. So we hope that that's okay with you. Oh, error. All right. Let me reshare. Okay. It should be fixed now. Karsh, could you please try again? Apologies for this glitch. Works. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So let's take another 2 minutes. Apologies for this. And that's why we're trying it in the beginning and not in the exercise. Thank you very much for this. Jaya, nice to see you here. Nice to see some familiar faces. All right, now we have quite a few responses. I'll just do this. I won't show you your names. You can see that in the chat, but just for the recording. But in any case, we have quite a few representatives of Carbon Check, a VVB from India that is our largest VVB, so that is normal. We have quite a few representatives of SustainCert, and the reviewers that they use to check audit reports, so that is great. Then we have calibration between the VVBs and the reviewers. We have Recarbon also participating significantly, and of course, Gold Standard. Then everybody seems to be quite excited about the webinar. A little less right now. Um, most of us are located in India, in different parts of India. somebody's in Amsterdam apart from me. That's great to know. And who's currently auditing sustainable rice projects? Um, 20% of you are currently auditing. No is 45%, and no, but soon to start is 23%, and other is 14%. So that's normal because we have a lot of gold standard and sustain cert representatives. But good to see that some of you are already working on these kind of projects. That is fantastic. I hope that this workshop will be timely and very useful for you. How familiar are you with the Sustainable Rice Methodology 2.4? I hope the ones that are familiar, the ones that are doing the audit, but don't worry, we're going to get you much more familiar with that today. And with gold standard requirements for points. Um, you have quite a few resources available on the website, but we hope you get more and more familiar with us in the future. And then that is it. I'm going to just move on to the next section of the presentation. Thank you very much for participating in this short survey. I hope the next time we use the forms for the exercise is going to be faster. Okay, so let me, without further ado, pass the word to um, Lokesh, who's going to take you through the emission reduction calculations of the sustainable rice methodology. Thank you. Go ahead, Lokesh.
Thank you, Martha, and welcome participants to this webinar on the GS rice methodology. Some of you must have participated in the webinar that we had when this methodology was launched, and some of you must have also gone through it in connection to your work related to the upcoming audits or the audits that you are already conducting. The methodology is basically uh, uh, founded on the CDM small scale methodology AMS3 AU, which was taken as a base and then it was upscaled for application in all circumstances, including micro scale, small scale, and large scale projects. And it gives you more flexibility and user friendliness in its application. And as VVBs, you would be assessing the application of this methodology in validation, verification of various projects and programs. I would quickly run you through the applicability and emission reduction calculation approaches. The idea is not to actually go much into depth of each and every clause by clause, the methodological requirements, but to give a broad overview or sensitization of the methodology. So let me start with the applicability or eligibility of projects which can apply this methodology. So this methodology is broadly applicable to all activities that reduce methane emission uh, from rice fields. That may include shortening the flooded conditions in the rice fields, allowing aerobic conditions instead of anaerobic conditions in the cultivation methods, and also applying the directly seeded rice for cultivation instead of the transplanted rice. Um, on the right hand side of this slide, you see there is a flow chart which shows how you assess the scope and eligibility of eligibility for application of this methodology. So you start with asking the question on any project that comes to your audit, whether the project has changed the water regime from continuously flooded to intermittently flooded, or shorten the period of flooded conditions. If that's the answer is yes, with clear evidences proving that, the project becomes eligible. If the answer is no, you move to the second question, which is whether the project has applied water regime during the AWD method and aerobic rice cultivation method. Uh, if the answer is yes, again the project is eligible. If no, it moves to the third question, whether the direct seeded rice TSR method has been applied or not. And if answer is yes, again the project is eligible. So broadly, any activity that reduces methane from water management techniques application in the field by shortening the flooded rice period or by changing to intermittent flooding, changing to alternate wetting and drying method. All those are eligible into this methodology. Next, please. There are several applicability conditions associated with application of this methodology. Once you have assessed the eligibility of a project, you have to go to the second step of assessing the eligibility, the applicability. So you start with the question whether the farm classified is upland or rain-fed, um, and deep water. If it is classified as one of these land categories, then the methodology is not applicable to that kind of a project. And then you move to the second question of the another applicability condition, which says that the project area should be predominantly characterized by irrigated flooded fields for an extended period of time during the growing season. Uh, then the rice fields should be equipped with controlled irrigation and drainage facilities, and the project uh, activity should not lead to decrease in rice yield. So once you have assessed till this point, you have the next point of assessment in question, which is on the rice cultivars. Have new rice cultivars have been introduced by change in land management practice or not? If the answer is yes, that means new cultivar has been introduced. Then the methodology will not be applicable. And if there are no changes, then again you are moved to another layer of applicability requirement, which asks you to determine whether the project has the capacity to provide training and technical support to farmers who are involved in the activity. And then the cultivation practice compliance with the local and regulatory the restrictions. Mind you, this is not assessing the regulatory surplus. This is only applicability of the project, which says that no practice should be in contradiction with the local regulation or restriction in place. So after you assess that, you have the last question in the scheme of applicability, which is the capacity of TDs to and infrastructure available with them to measure the methane from rice fields and reference fields using the closed chamber method and the laboratory analysis. If they have this capacity, the project is eligible, and they can go ahead with the use of those techniques in calculation of emission reductions. If they don't have that capacity, we have the assessment would be whether the IPCC values are available for those conditions or not. If those values are available and the project is micro or small scale, then the project can still apply this methodology using the simplified approaches which are given by this methodology. Another specific requirement relating to any other project or VPA by the same project developer within 1 kilometer radius of the project. Uh, 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 if it is already in registration stage, then the project is not eligible. If it is not there, then the project becomes eligible. Um, so this is broadly the applicability conditions. We have tried to make it in the stepwise flowchart so that it is kind of helpful for assessing the different conditions on ground. The text is already in the normative part of the methodology. Next, please. The project boundary covers the rice fields where cultivation methods and water regimes are being changed, and the spatial extent of the project boundary includes all fields that changes the cultivation method. The You can see that the baseline emissions are coming from the methane emission, which is in absence of the project activity by continuously flooded rice fields. And in the project scenario, the emissions are uh, estimated or calculated through different sources, including the the methane emission from the rice fields and two emission from application of fertilizer, and also the CO2 emission from preparation of a field for cultivation. So we'll go much in detail of these emissions later on, but this is the snapshot of what all is included in the project boundary. Next, please. Here we are presenting the scheme of stratification. The methodology gives basic requirements of what parameters must be considered for stratification. So you know that stratification is required in order to arrive at a representative uh, kind of representative sampling method for application of the quantification methods, and arriving at the finally the results on emission reductions. So stratification can be done using several uh, parameters. There are 8 different categories which are already stipulated in the methodology. But mind you, these are not limited to 8 categories. If there are specific categories which are more relevant to the project, they can always be added and validated by you at the time of validation. There are 3 categories which are mandatory for stratification to be considered. One being the water regime on season, and the other being water regime pre-season, and the organic amendment type. So here you can see different. There are different water regimes uh, which are different subcategories to water regimes which are identified in the table that is given in the methodology. Again, the organic amendment type is mandatory one, which goes into whether organic amendment is applied or not. If applied, so what are those organic amendments? Whether it is a straw, it is organic manure, it is say or any other type of organic amendment that may be applied. Application rate of organic amendment is not a mandatory parameter. If those are available, they should be considered alongside the organic amendment. If organic amendment is no amendment, then the application rate becomes irrelevant and should not be considered. Similarly, soil pH, soil organic carbon, climate, and number of days are parameters which are not mandatory. One can say that climate is something which should be considered and should be mandatory, but the idea is that in a project's application, if climate varies from one place to the other, from one field to the other, they should be stratified. If not, then there is no relevance of keeping climate as a uh, uh, stratification category. Here, an example of assigning strata is given on the right bottom of this slide. You see there are 3 mandatory categories: single drainage in on season, and in pre-season less than 180 days, what is called the shortened period of flooding, is identified as the cultivation pattern with no organic amendment as the amendment type is identified. These 3 make the mandatory part of the estimation, mandatory part of the certification. And medium duration variety, that is number of days until the maturity. So that is also one non-mandatory category that is considered here. So we have the stratum name as per the individual categories of all the uh, parameters considered as W2, T3, Q1, and T2. These abbreviations are already available in the methodology, and project developers are free to add more number of parameters if they want to in the table. Table is only indicative. Of course, the mandatory parameters must be considered. And similarly, the second example you see in the table is on continuous flooding in the in the on season, then non-flooded pre-season, which is longer days, or what do we call it, the longer duration period is more than 80 days, that is considered. Straw here is being used as amendment, and again it is medium duration variety. So you can see that the abbreviation or the stratum name is changed from W2 to W1, and P3 remains same. uh, the O1 is on season straw application, and medium duration variety remains same. Um, and the stratum assigned code is can be given of the different strata as they are identified. Next, please. Now we come to the additionality. I would not go to what is additionality and how is it just assessed. You are experts. You know the concept in detail. Just bringing up to your attention that there are five different options given to the project developers for demonstrating additionality. First is the applicable activity requirements, that is land use and forestry activity requirements. We are currently in process of evolving to another activity requirements which are dedicated to agriculture, and those were out for public consultation. Once those are published, those will be applied as in context of this RICE methodology. Again, the tools, CDM tools, and any other approved additionality tool YGS are the applicable methods of assessment of additionality. The project must not take place without carbon finance. That is the basic premise of any carbon project. And the activity should not be mandated by law or triggered by any legal requirements of the host country. That is another layer of requirement that needs to be assessed during the validation. Crediting for activity shall only be allowed until the date of legal requirements would take effect. So if there is a prospective date, there is a prospective date by which a legal requirement would be enforced, that date should be considered as a cutoff date uh, for uh, for closing the time of emission reduction claiming, or the end of the crediting period, even if crediting period is it should have been more than that in case of absence of this mandate. Next. Here is a depiction of the estimation methods which are established in the methodology. So we have three different types of estimation methods in the methodology. Direct measurement is the most preferred method, which is guided by the Appendix A of the methodology, is applicable for all kind of projects, large scale, small scale, or micro scale. All type of projects can apply the direct measurement. It is not mandatory to apply direct measurement though. So in theory, a micro scale project, if they have the capacity and they want to go for a direct measurement, they are always welcome to do so. And on again the same, the all kind of projects, large scale, small and micro scales, they can also go for country specific values which are guided by the Appendix B of this methodology if they don't have the capacity to do the direct measurement. uh, they will have to demonstrate that the direct measurement is not possible because of various factors. Maybe approach to the reference field is not there, or necessary laboratory facilities are not available in the host country, and so on. And then they can use the country specific values. These direct measurement and country specific values, these are also popularly called as tier 3 and tier 2 respectively. Then the methodology also gives a simplification approach, or simplified approach for small and micro scale projects, which do not have the capacity to implement direct measurement, or do not have country specific values available with them, to apply IPCC global defaults, regional defaults, or country specific default values. These country specific default values are already given in the methodology and should not be confused with the country specific values that we are asking to arrive at using Appendix B. So these are the country specific default values which are already given in the methodology, not the one which are given which are estimated using Appendix B of the methodology. Um, then they just go back to the previous one, Martha, please. As I explained, direct measurement is the most preferred approach. If that is not possible, Appendix B should be referred for the country specific using the country specific literature and studies which are available. And if that is also not possible, small and micro scale projects can go for simplified approach, but large scale projects cannot. Now we are going much in detail of the calculation approaches. I would request my colleague Ashwin to take over from here and continue the presentation. Over to you, Ashwin.
Thank you, Lokesh, and hello, everyone. Um, I will not go into the details of the formula to be applied, but I'll just touch upon some of the key factors to be considered. So as Lokesh mentioned, the simplified approach is to be considered only for small scale or micro scale projects. And the methodology, table 9 of the methodology, has provided the default values with reference to IPCC 2019 guidelines. One thing that you may have to look into for sure is whether the country-specific values have a precedence, have they applied country-specific values, and whether they are available or not, and whether the regional values have been applied only in the absence of country-specific values. And then global values in that order. So those details are provided in table 9 of the methodology. Uh, and for all small scale projects, they can directly be applied. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. I will not go into the details of calculation process, which are given in slide 8 and slide 9. But just to give you a broad overview that the steps are detailed out in the methodology. Many of the default values which are sourced from IPCC are also provided. And if the project developers apply them directly with reference to the methodology, they can be allowed. One thing that one needs to take care also has to do with project emissions. So methane, N2O, as well as CO2 are accounted when it comes to project emissions. When it comes to N2O, one actually can expect higher amounts of nitrous oxide emissions when there is a transition from continuously flooded field to an AWD system. And this has to be accounted for. So there are two specific N2O emissions to be considered. One, in those cases where there is an increase in the fertilizer application as compared to baseline scenario. And the other one, if the fertilizer application is the same as the baseline scenario. And the N2O emissions in both these cases are to be applied. And default value to be considered, default emission factor to be considered in these instances are also provided in the methodology itself with reference to IPCC 2019 guideline. Also, in the case of increase in fertilizer application and increase in N2O emissions, I mean, a de minimis of 5% is also can also be considered if the emissions from N2O does not go beyond 5% of the total ER, then it need not be considered. Carbon dioxide emissions have to do with field preparation, which basically has to do with operation of equipment and machinery to put in place the systems required for AWD system. And the emissions, once recorded and once certified, need not be monitored in the succeeding performance reviews. So these have to do with project emissions. Emission reductions owing to decrease in fertilizer application, N2O emissions which can be reduced due to a decrease in fertilizer application is not considered under the methodology at present. However, just to inform you, there could be an updated module which might be released, which will cater to that specific element. No leakages are considered under this methodology. So that, in short, covers all the ER calculation approaches. Next slide, please. So when it comes to uncertainty, there are two things to be considered. One is the simplified approach. So in the case of simplified approach where default values are applied country-specific or regional or global, a default uncertainty deduction factor of 15% is to be applied. So that's only applicable to simplified approaches, which are limited to small scale and micro scale projects. All other projects which apply either a country baseline, country emission factor, or country specific factors, or direct measurement approach will have to apply Annex A of land use and forestry activity requirements to arrive at what will be the uncertainty deduction to be applied. So Annex A of LUF-AR details out the method method on uncertainty estimation and the deductions which have to be considered in case there is uncertainties to be accounted for. So these are two approaches that one needs to keep in mind. Only simplified approach has a default UD of 15% to be considered. Next slide, please. So I will very quickly go through Appendix A and Appendix B. So Appendix A of the methodology gives a non-prescriptive guideline on how to measure methane from rice fields. There are also a couple of references which are provided, a handbook on greenhouse gas emissions from rice fields from the Institute of Agro-Environmental Studies, as well as another report from the same institute. Basically, both of them give details of the good practices on measuring methane from the field. These are not mandatory, these are not prescriptive, but it is assumed that the details given there would be followed when it comes to measuring methane emissions from the field. For instance, ensuring that there are 3 reference fields to measure baseline emissions as well as project emissions, and these 3 reference fields are there for each of the stratum considered, which was discussed initially. So there should be these reference fields will also have to be maintained during the life of the project. So those things are detailed in Appendix A, um, and uh, and then Appendix B explains the Tier 2 uh, uh, approaches, how to develop a country-specific values for the project. And in this case, a specific case study of Spain is given as an illustrative example. It is not the values are not to be taken directly from the from Appendix B. It is only for illustrative purpose, but those approaches could be considered in case a project plans to develop country-specific emission factors as well. Just to note is that it is uh, expected that as much as possible, measurement will be taken directly from the field, and only if that is not possible should one try and get data from published papers and other scientific document. And only if that is not available should a project developer refer to IPCC guidelines for scaling factors, etc., etc. So the project developer shall have to demonstrate that no published document is available or could be applied with high confidence to arrive at the country-specific scaling factors in those instances. So that is all those things are detailed out in Appendix B of the methodology. I think that kind of, yeah, I think we can go ahead, Martha. So that explains Appendix A and Appendix B. And the next slide, please. Yeah, I don't think I'll go into the details of it. These are so all these illustrative tables on how exactly the scaling factors are estimated, etc., are provided in these appendices. And in case there are any comments, any observations from the VVBs, we are happy to discuss them separately. The next one. Thanks. That's it. Over to you, Martha.
Well, thank you very much, Lokesh and Ashwin, for this very in-depth overview of the methodology. There's a few questions out there that we can take now. If you have further questions, please put them in the chat. I see that Ashwin and Lokesh have been responding to questions, but would you like to respond to them, for the sake of everyone as well, again? Lokesh? First of all, the positive list, if the positive list can be...
Yeah, thanks, Martha. So the question on positive list, yes, the answer is yes. Positive lists need to be applied when the tool 19 is being applied for demonstration of additionality in that case. And then the question on the uncertainty factor applied on emission reductions, also reducing project emissions and hence not maintaining conservativeness. This was discussed at length when the methodology was being finalized, and the default reduction factor is actually is arrived at after operating the difference between the PE and BE in actual. And if we have to apply deductions on baseline emissions, the deduction factor would be different, and for PE it would be different. To remove those kind of complexities for small scale and micro scale projects, it was decided to keep one single percent that is applied on the difference of the two, and that was arrived at 15%. Hence, it considers both difference of P and BE. The third
And that's
question is
project
on
emissions and baseline
and
emissions,
baseline
correct? Mm-hmm.
emissions. Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes. So stratification question, whether stratification is required for projects using simplified approach. The answer is yes, but it has to be determined whether the stratification is natural or not. That means if the exercise of stratification will be conducted, if the entire project falls into one single stratum, that will be taken as the stratification of the project.
great, amazing. If there are no other questions, and I don't see any other questions in the chat, maybe we can move on to the next part, which is the new developments on the Rice Hub, and I'll pass the word to David.
Yeah, thanks very much, Martha, and thanks to all our participants for joining. So, as Martha mentioned at the beginning, the methodology itself was updated and released as part of a program that we are currently implementing with our partners, IRI. And the objective of the program was actually to provide resources to support better access to carbon finance for sustainable rice projects in Vietnam. So the methodology was the first step, but as part of this program, we've also developed and published a number of resources. And last month, at the beginning of the month, we launched a Rice Sustainability Hub, which is essentially a resource hub, which is hosted on the GS4GG website. And it hosts all the different resources we're going to quickly introduce to you in the next few minutes. And at the moment, both the hub and the resources are in the testing phase. So we're very open to feedback, and you will find the feedback form both on the website, but also in the presentation here, and we can share the link. So we go to the next slide. Yeah, so the resources on the website essentially fall into two categories. So the first category of resources are introductory materials and guidance documents, and we've published 3. So and those are the ones that are listed on the slide now. So the first is just a short summary of the methodology. The second is a step-by-step guide to certifying activities under gold standard, which is relevant for rice projects, but just projects more generally. And the third is a short guide for applying the digital SDG impact tool for rice projects. Because the geographical scope of our program is Vietnam, these documents you'll also find published in Vietnamese, but the contents are generally applicable. Next slide. So since the launch webinar for the methodology last summer, we've actually collected many questions on the methodology, and we have published these in an up-to-date FAQ, the link to which you'll also find on the hub. Some of the questions come up multiple times, and you can see some examples on the slides. So if you do have any questions about the methodology, we'd encourage you as the first port of call to check out the FAQ section to see if they've already been answered. We'll keep this up to date over time, but of course, if there are other questions you have, please do submit it to the Secretariat, and we can then subsequently include them in the FAQ. Next slide. The second part, other than the guidance documents, are a couple of tools and templates, which we'll run you through now. So the first of these is a pre-filled project design document template. So most of the resources on the hub are primarily focused at project developers and indeed newer project developers to rice activities. That includes this document. So we'd encourage you to download it from the hub and just take a look. But in essence, the pre-filled PDD contains some generic information on a fictional rice project located in Vietnam. It's really just to give an indication of the kind of information that should be filled in the different parts of the project design document templates. The important thing to note is the information is provided for illustrative purposes, and it doesn't affect the validation process. So all rice project PDDs would need to undergo full validation, irrespective of whether this pre-filled PDD has been used or not. by the project developer, but it's really just an informational tool for project developers, so they can have an idea of what a filled up PDD would look like. So those are some of the tools and templates, and I'm going to pass over to our colleague Ha, who's going to talk us briefly through the Excel-based emission reduction calculation tool. Over to you, Ha.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Good morning and all afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I would like to quickly introduce you about the ER tool for the RISE methodology, and I hope that before this webinar you already download and have a look on the file we published on the tool section under the RISE Sustainability Hub information in the Gold Standard website. Okay, now back to the tool. It is the Excel-based tool to estimate the emission reduction for the rice cultivation project applying the AWD technology. This tool is designed to support the project developer in calculating the emission reduction. So depend on the approach selected by the project developer following the decision tree that as we present before. The project developer could use the relevant tab in the Excel tool for tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 for calculating the emission reduction for their project. So similar to the gold standard emission reduction tool, we have the color code for the cells for the PD to use. So basically, the yellow cells mean that it is a place for filling the project information, and the cell in the blue color, maybe light or bold color, are containing formula for calculation. It is shall be note that the tool is optional for the project developer to use. So that means that they could use their own calculation model if they wish to. And in that case, the VVB can use our gold standard emission reduction tool for cross-checking the result from the PD's own model. And it's also shall be noted that the VVB, when validating or verifying the emission reduction for calculation from the PD, the VVB cell also validates the formula in the blue cell, but not only the project information in the yellow cell. So please feel free to contact to Gold Standard if you found any mistake, or you can write the file finding to the PD if any change to the formula in the blue cell. So we would welcome any of the comment or question regarding the tool. So please do not hesitate to contact us. So now I go through some function of the Excel tool. So can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So the first is for the tier 1 calculation. First, there will be two options for the project developer to choose, which is the global default value or the country-specific default value. Depend on the PDs choose on the option. They can skip some of the line accordingly, and it will guiding in the Excel tool. Can we go next, please? This one is for the tier 2 calculation. So there are more information to fill than the previous tier 1, as the project emission is required to be considered in the tier 2, including the project emission from nitrogen input, or emission from land preparation, etc. We have all the section in the PD in the Excel tool for the PD to fill in the information, and it's also shall we note that for tier 2 and tier 3, the uncertainty deduction will be assessed as per the guidance from the roof requirement, while for the tier 1, the default value of 15% is applied. So in this session, I put 10%. It's assumed that this is the result from the assessment based on the roof requirement. So next, please. Yeah, and this is screenshot for some calculation for the tier 3, and actually it's similar to the tier 1, so I do not go into details, but only note that there's a difference that the emission factor for this case will be directly measured by the PD following the guidance from the NHA of the methodology, and will be need to be filled into the ER tool. Please go next slide. Yeah, and then this is the last note for the emission reduction calculation tool. You can see in the ER tab of the tool, there is a section for selection of the tier And it is important because now when you correctly select the tier, the tool will resolve the emission reduction correctly. For example, if you select tier 1, you will see from the right side in the last year, the emission reduction is actually is above 60,000 tons CO2. However, it is capped at 60,000 because for tier 1 is only applicable for the small scale project. And for if you select the tier 2 or tier 3, after filling in the information accordingly, the table emission reduction table in the cover tab will show the information appropriately. Okay, and thank you. And I would pass the floor back to Martha for introduction of the methodology auditing checklist. Please go ahead, Martha.
Thank you very much, Yerha, for this very useful tool. I think that will be useful both for project developers and VVBs. The other tool that we have created with enormous help from Ha was a validation checklist. You have seen last year the general validation checklists for VPAs and for projects, standalone projects. We have created one for standalone projects for validation specifically for this methodology, which is useful for auditors when filling in the validation report, also for the technical reviewers to assess the completeness and accuracy of the validation report, and for the certification reviewers as well to do the same. The checklist is an annex to the actual VVB validation checklist and is annexed to the validation report. We hope you also find it useful. It has a set of relevant questions that breaks down the methodology into specific questions that you need answering with yes and no tick boxes for each question. Sometimes there's not applicable when it's, for example, an optional stratification criteria. And there's space to give the means of validation in the template. There is space for more information, parameters, or questions that you can expand the checklist as you see fit for your specific audit. For example, if the VVB uses another factor for stratification, you can add that one in the form. And there is, of course, an area for the statement and opinion of the VVB. There is a few sections in the checklist. There is the summary and guidance. Of course, in the beginning, please read it carefully. Validation assessment includes all basically the actual checklist, which covers the scope and applicability requirements of the methodology, the project boundary, additionality assessment, baseline and project scenarios, emission reductions, and the monitoring methodology. So you can go, if you go through the checklist, you're sure to go through the entire methodology and validate it properly. Then we have added another section on documents and evidence that has been reviewed so that you can add those with their full titles and authors there with reference numbers so that throughout the checklist you can simply add the reference number of the document and not having to copy paste the whole thing over and over. And then there's a findings section where you put the CARs and CLs and the FARs as usual, so the corrective action request, etc. How to fill it out? So you have, this is what the checklist looks like. This is actually from the previous checklist, but the project boundary, these kind of questions show you what to check exactly, and there is a yes or no possible answer. Then if there is a finding, basically if the answer is bold blue text, then that's acceptable. If it's not a bold blue text, that probably needs finding, such a corrective action request or a clarification request, which you fill out then over here. Then you provide a reference document that you have checked in order to provide this answer. You could also say, okay, this is reference 5 from the annex below, so you don't need to write the whole thing with dated, etc. Then how did you check it? So the means of validation, you can explain and justify why these means of validation were appropriate for this question of project boundary. And then the assertion statement. then you can only complete the assertion statement if everything else is completed and the findings are closed. So if there is a car raised a corrective action request, you need to close the car, and only then can you say that that your assertion is this or that. If the car cannot be closed, then your assertion is yes, no, we cannot validate this project, and then the validation opinion is negative. Hopefully that never happens to you. It's not a nice thing to do. Now, how to fill it out? For some questions, there's both answers are blue, which means either of the options is acceptable. So that's also okay. It's not like there's no right answer on is it continuously fluted or not. It's simply to know, instead of you writing in the audit report, this is a stratum in which fields are continuously flooded, you just put it in the checklist and that's fine. And for some questions, especially in the monitoring sections, there might be a deviation. So if there's a deviation, it's very important that you describe it and you provide your opinion to that deviation below. Then there's sections that you can skip. We talked a lot about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So if you, for example, have a project that applies tier 2, then you can skip the tier 1 and tier 3 sections of the checklist. You don't need to fill out the whole thing, but only the sections that are applicable to this project. Then in terms of findings, this is the same format as we had for the general checklist, where you have the type of finding, and then the final conclusion. You have all the rounds of review. Please add more lines in case it cannot be closed in 2 rounds. And then if it cannot be closed within the validation but needs to be checked during verification, for example, then you can turn it into a FAR. As usual, I think this is quite intuitive. Oops. And indeed, there's a list of FARs at the end that can be considered by the colleague that will be doing the verification next time. This is the checklist. We don't have a checklist for verification yet. Let's see the success of this one. I'm pretty sure that you're all doing first validations and then verifications. So hopefully this will be useful for you, and hopefully we'll find a way to create a verification checklist as well. And that is it on the checklist. If you have any questions on the RISE Hub or any of the tools provided, please let us know. Lokesh, would you like to explain the few questions that came up in the chat until now, especially around
Yes.
project boundary? Can you please
Yes.
summarize the question first? It is
Yeah.
about whether the project boundary can be like the POA boundary can be the entire country and the project boundary can be an entire region, which means that there will be overlap with other projects and that will be an issue. So can you elaborate on how to deal with this as a VVB and as a
current requirements do not constrain project developers to identify entire host country as POA boundary or entire provinces as VPA boundaries. Even POAs could be multi-country POAs comprising of several countries into one POA. The restriction is what the methodology applies is on the application of simplified approaches, and simplified approaches are applicable for small scale and micro scale activities. So for those small scale and micro scale activities that are applying simplified approaches, the paragraph 2.2.3 of the methodology would be applied. That means no other project or VPA should be registered within 1 kilometer from the closest point of the VPA being considered. So that's the basic requirement. So in the nutshell, the answer to this question would be that no, we cannot ask the developers to limit the boundaries on field clusters and not taking the entire region as one with a expectation or the prospect of including new areas into those. We do not have any background or a backup from any of the requirements to do so. Then the second question that has come on the chat box is on POA requirements state that maximum crediting period for AGR VPAs is 20 years. Can a project apply 10 years fixed crediting period as stated in LUF activity requirements? So LUF activity requirements state that 10 years fixed crediting period is applied if methodology doesn't stipulate any crediting period. Methodology implicitly indicates that the crediting period can be renewed twice by giving the requirements for second and third crediting period. The implied meaning of that would be the 15 years crediting period with two renewals in between. So that's the methodological requirements, and of course the activity requirement, the LUF activity requirements have a fixed period, which is a high level requirement and is superseded by the methodology level requirements. We are also considering to bring more clarity on this in the next version of the activity requirement, the dedicated agriculture activity requirements, and also in the next iteration of the methodology itself.
Thank you, Lokesh. And thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you to everyone that took the time to be here and to do the exercises with us and ask questions. We've had fantastic questions. Good luck with the application of this methodology on the ground, and do not hesitate to ask us questions if you have them. Even during the audit, if you're not sure how to assess something, let us know and we'll try and help as quickly as possible. We know that this is a complex thing you're going through right now. Thank you everyone once again, and have a fantastic day or evening.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone. Bye.